Hi there, welcome to today's tutorial. My name's Hayden from blendertutorials.org, and today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at how to create a stylized sailing ship through the use of a lot of modifiers as well as generalized modeling techniques. This tutorial is part 1 of 3. The other 2 parts I'm actually going to refilm after this, but I tried something different with this tutorial in terms of how I filmed it and created it, and unfortunately it didn't work out. I filmed it all beforehand, and then I thought to myself that I would do voiceovers afterwards, and that just became such a headache. So you'll probably notice that parts might seem a little bit rushed, or things might not sync up exactly, and unfortunately that's just due to the nature of how I tried to film this. That being said, there's still a lot of useful contents herein, and I really hope that you enjoy today's tutorial. Okay, let's get started. We are first going to start with building the deck of our ship. Let's remove the cube. To do so, press X to delete, and then confirm the deletion. After that, you're going to want to press Shift A and add a plane. Go into edit mode by pressing Tab on your keyboard. Now we need to bisect the plane in half, so Ctrl R for Loop Select tool, and then left click and press escape straight away so you don't move that bisection. Delete half the vertices, and now we're going to go to the modifiers menu, which is that wrench over here. And now we're going to add a modifier, go down under the generate list and find the mirror modifier. Then you're going to press the clipping button on the modifier. That's just going to ensure that the center vertices stick together. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create the basic shape of the top deck by pulling out these vertices. Remember, G for grab. Alternatively, you can use the move tool in your toolbar on the left-hand side of the screen. To extend the deck, select the 2 vertices and then press E to extrude. You can hold Ctrl to snap to the grid if you're in orthographic view. Then fix the shape of the deck so it's nice and curved like so. And now it's just rinse and repeat. This platform that we've created is going to act as the forecastle for our stylized ship. From the forecastle, we want to come down onto the main deck. To do that, we're going to extrude out our ship even further. You want to be in a side perspective view while doing this, as it will be easier to judge the shape. Let's pop back up into top perspective, and we will start to extrude out the main deck of this ship. We can go pretty far with this because the main deck is going to be relatively flat. Pop back into the side view and extrude your selection up. This is going to act as our quarterdeck. This is where the helm usually might be found on a ship of this style, the helm being this steering wheel-like structure. So we're going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. A lot of people often call this part of a sailing ship a bridge, where in fact it's not called a bridge at all, it's called a quarterdeck. The reason is because bridges, the term bridge itself on ships, actually came about much later than the age of sail. The term bridge in regards to ships actually came about with the development of the paddle boat. The reason being is that you have these 2 huge paddles on either side, and it would actually occlude a lot of the view. So what they did to get around this problem is that they created a bridge that spanned these 2 paddles, and thus the term was born. This is a bit of a more simplistic version of that history, but that's the main gist of it. So that's why when you look at an old sailing boat, the part where the helm is, so the steering wheel, isn't called a bridge. It's called a quarterdeck because bridges didn't exist until quite later. So there's just a little bit of interesting maritime facts. So let's go back to the tutorial. Okay, to construct the quarterdeck, we're just going to extrude it out just like we did with the forecastle. Be sure to compensate for the curvature at this part. You can come up with your own curvature, of course. You can have it flat at the end, or you can have it even more curvy than I make it. It's up to you. This is going to be your design at the end. So now that we've constructed our deck, let's go into edit mode, select everything with A for all, and we're just going to extrude it all down on the Z axis. Now let's do a little bit of a trick to flatten this out. We're going to essentially use a property of scaling because scaling is essentially multiplying. So we're going to scale on Z by 0. The reason that this function works is because scaling objects or scaling parts of objects in Blender works almost like a multiplication function. So if we think about it, if we scale 2 points and we're scaling it from a median point here, if we scale it by 0, so multiplying by 0, we're changing those points' values to equal 0 because any value multiplied by 0 equals 0. So that's why when we select that entire bottom part of the ship, we have a median point that's between all those parts. And when we scale it on Z, we're essentially telling all those vertices, all your Z values have to equal 0, which is that median point. So whenever you want to flatten something in a certain direction, simply scale it in the direction that you want by 0. Now let's go into the side view and we're going to select the front part of the ship. To select the front, go into wireframe mode and then box select the 2 vertices, then just simply pull them back. Wonderful. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add another modifier, specifically the subdivision surface modifier. Now, right away, we're going to see that this changes the look of our ship quite drastically, but we can fix this up and make it look a little bit more nice. Simply select all the top deck, and what we're going to do is we're going to use creases to essentially flatten this out. So to do that, we can either go to our sidebar and increase the mean crease value with our selection, or we can use the shortcut, which is Shift and E. Using the crease tool in conjunction with a subdivision modifier is really useful. It allows us to define areas that should retain their structure in relationship to the original mesh that the subdivision is derived from. I use this crease tool a lot when creating hard surface models. Now I'm just showing it to you here because I think it's actually quite a useful tool to develop that nice organic shape of the ship while retaining the flat nature of the deck above it. Now we're going to extend the boat towards the keel. Let's select all the faces on the bottom. Let's also align it a little better on the x-axis, just so it's got a bit more slope to the shape of the ship. Now simply extrude it out and scale it down a little bit and push it in. Be careful not to push it in too far because we have clipping on in our mirror settings. Next, I'm going to select all the edges along the keel and I'm going to pull them down on the z-axis. We then want to scale these on the y-axis. As you can see, due to the subdivision modifier, we're generating quite a reasonable result, even though we don't have much topology. Also, in regards to blendertutorials.org, I want to thank everyone who has signed up to the newsletter thus far. For those of you who aren't aware, I'm developing a new service for teaching Blender. This new service aims to address a lot of problems that I see when learning Blender. This includes the vast amount of content and being able to retain that knowledge, as well as having a concrete step-by-step lesson plan. I want to stress the fact that this is not a course. Blendertutorials.org is not a course. It is its own very unique service, and I'm very, very excited to finally show you in the upcoming weeks. If you haven't already, please visit blendertutorials.org and sign up to the newsletter for direct news, or hit the subscribe and bell button down below so that you can keep up to date with the development. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the weeks ahead, but for now, I'm really excited and I can't wait to show you. Now we're going to start to model in some detail. Go into edit mode on your object, and now we're going to create a loop cut. Press E and then F to constrain the loop cut to the shape of the edge above it. You can use F to toggle which edge you want to constrain your loop cut to. Perfect. As you can see, we've constructed a really nice shape to now use our loop selection tool, which is just Alt and left click, and we can extrude that out. Then we're going to use a mean crease to clean it up a little bit. Also ensure that you have the top faces selected as well and give them a mean crease. Now let's go into our edge selection filter, which is at the top left-hand corner of the screen. So we can select the diagonal edges and we can reduce the crease on them. What that's going to allow is it's going to give us a nice and smooth shape for our wooden beam, which is what I'm imagining this is, to go around our ship like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean this up a little bit by selecting the loop, and I'm going to move that loop up on the Z axis. Careful not to select anything that is already perfect. As you see, I pull up the Quarterdeck a little bit too far. I then have to go back and use the control and click method to get the correct selection. And now I can just pull that up on the Z axis. Now we're going to work on the walls that surround the forecastle as well as the quarterdeck. To do this, we're going to add a cube to our scene. Let's go into edit mode and we're going to scale it down on all axes. Perfect. Now, let's go to the top view and move it into the correct position. After that, go to your modifiers and add a mirror modifier. Perfect. There's no need to do the clipping option as these meshes will not be clipping as they will be acting as the barrier on our ship. Rotate them around so that they are roughly in the correct orientation. Try to position them at an equal distance apart. When we use the duplicate command, Shift and D, try to keep the duplicates also at the similar distance. Perfect. Now that you've done that, let's select all the top faces with our face select tool. We're just going to pull them up on the Z axis and voila. Now we're going to create the top wooden part for our barrier. And we're going to be really lazy about this, and we're going to go into our boat and go into edit mode, select the top faces of that curve that we've already made, duplicate it with Shift D, and drag it up on the Z axis. It can be clipping through our mesh just a little bit, but that's okay. We'll just extrude the result up with our E key, and there we go. Pretty simple. Now we can fix up these problem areas just by changing the crease on some of the edges. So the edges that you probably want to fix up are the inner facing ones, just as I'm doing here. And I'll just tweak the edges ever so slightly to match it a little bit better. Okay, it's looking really good. And see? And we'll also fix up the other side as well, just the same way, by increasing our crease on those side edges. And we'll also do the same for this face here. Simply select it and increase the mean crease. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into edit mode and construct a piece of wood, essentially, that our rigging is going to be attached to. So I'm literally just going to extrude that face up and select everything and use a mean crease. As you're seeing, we're utilizing that mean crease quite extensively while we're using this subdivision surface. Now let us create the main mast. Simply get a cylinder, scale it down so that it's the correct shape, more or less. So I'm going to scale it on the Z axis, and then I'm going to scale it down a little bit just so it's the correct size. Then simply move it into the correct position. The main mast should be on the main deck. I'm actually going to use this shape to act as almost like a stylized brace. So I'm just going to duplicate the top face, scale it down a little bit. So that's going to give me a good extrusion for creating the main mask while leaving that brace separate. I'm then going to scale down the top face just so that it's a bit tapered towards the top. And I'm going to just separate the mast from the brace. Now what I want is I want this brace to have duplicates that run all the way up the mast. So to do that, we're going to apply an array modifier to it. Now what an array modifier does is that it duplicates the base mesh a number of times in a certain direction. Now because we want it to go up, we want to set the Z value to something other than 0, and we want the others to be 0. In this case, I'm going to set the Z to 10, and I'm going to set X and Y to 0. I'm then going to increase the count value so that we get more of the array going up the mast. Now, you may see a bit of a problem, and that is that they're all the same size and they're not conforming to the tapering effect of the mast. Now I'm going to set my origin point to the geometry by right-clicking and then setting origin to geometry. Now that we've done that, we can snap the 3D cursor to that point, and we're going to add an empty object. An empty is essentially just a null if you're from After Effects. We're going to use the empty to control the tapering problem. Rename it Array Control, and now let's jump back into our array object, check Object Offset, and select your Array Control object that we just created. What we're now going to do with the Array Control object is we're going to scale it down on the Y and the X channel. Use the blue square to scale it down, and you'll notice that all the offsets in the array have now scaled down on the X and Y channels as well. Now let's create the crow's nest. Now for this, let's just simply create a cylinder, and we'll position it up the top of our mast. Let's go into edit mode now, and we're just going to scale up the top face and just scale everything down a little bit just so it fits a little nicer. Okay, now let's create the interior of this crow's nest. Select the top face, and we're going to use our eye for inset tool. Now we can simply extrude that inset down. Don't worry if it clips through at this point, because we'll just scale it down like so and position it just so that that mast isn't clipping through. There are plenty of other ways that we could have done this, but this is just nice and easy. Okay, now that we've got that crow's nest look, let's just create the final piece of the mast. This is where you'd usually see a flag flying from. And I'm just going to use a simple cube for this. Scale it down in edit mode, not in object mode like I did there. Just so eventually if you want to put a modifier on this, there's no problems down the road. And let's select the top face, and we're just simply going to move that top face up as so, and just scale it down. And there's our final piece of that mast. I'm going to create the structure from where the mast is going to be held from. So to do that, we're again just going to create a cylinder. Let's go into edit mode, rotate it 90 degrees, scale it down a little bit, move it into the correct position. I'm going to place mine here on this last brace, and I'm just going to scale it out on the X axis. Pretty simple. Let's just scale this up a little bit more on the X axis. And just like we did with the braces, I'm going to set the origin so that the origin is at the geometry. And let's just push it forward a little bit on Y. Next, we're going to create the rigging by creating a plane. We're going to use a lot of modifiers for this one. Simply go into edit mode, rotate it into the correct orientation, and place it on one side of your boat. The first modifier we're going to add is, of course, a mirror modifier, so that we're working with both of them at the same time. Now just simply position it correctly. And the next modifier we're going to add is a subdivision surface. You want to set that to simple and keep everything at 1. This will make sense now when we apply the wireframe modifier. Now you're not going to see a change as of yet. You have to go back into object mode to see any change. And as you can see, we've got the start of some cladding, some rope. The next modifier we're also going to add is an array modifier, and I think you can probably tell where we're going to go with this now. Let's set the value so that it's set to 1 on Z and 0 on X and Y, so that they're just touching. Now back in the wireframe modifier, I want you to press boundary so that we get all the other edges. And then in the array modifier, we're going to tweak the Z axis just a little bit, because we're going to try and merge them all together. Make sure that merge checkbox is checked. One way we can tell that this is all merged together nicely is we can set the shading to be smooth. Now, as you can see, there's a little bit of problems in that area there, so we can play around with the distance of that merge. Now, as you can see, it's not really helping too much. So let's play around with the Z transformation on the array, and you can see what's exactly happening here. Once everything's nice and smooth like it is here, we know that everything is merged together nicely. So we can just increase the array now, and it's going to keep those merges intact. Now we're going to create a lattice object, and this lattice object is going to be used to essentially deform the rope so it's a little bit more rope-like. Simply scale the lattice to encompass your rope and move it into the center, of course. And just scale it up on Y so it's encompassing it. Should just wrap around it quite nicely. Jump over to the object data properties, which is that green lattice, and just increase the resolution on the U, V, and W. The W one should have the most, because we are going to change that direction quite drastically. And now what we can do is we can add a final modifier underneath everything, which is a lattice modifier. And this lattice modifier is going to allow us to tap into that lattice to deform our mesh. Go into edit mode of your lattice. And now let's also turn on proportional editing, which is this icon up here. You can also press O and select the top part. And we're just going to scale it down. As you can see, I'm not quite liking the fall off, so I'm going to change the fall off to be sharp. You can use the mouse scroll wheel to change the area of effect of that proportional edit. And as you can see, we have created a nice tapering effect with our rigging. Now, I want to apply all these modifiers, but I don't want to do it manually, so I'm just going to convert this whole thing to a mesh. That's just gotten rid of everything in one go. Delete the lattice, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete 1/2 of my output, so just go into wireframe and delete it. And now we can apply that mirror modifier again if we so wish. Now we need to rotate our rigging down a little bit. To do that, we need to change our pivot point. So set our 3D cursor down at the base of our rigging, and let's change our pivot point to be our 3D cursor, and let's rotate. As you can see, it rotates quite nicely. Now, as you can see, it doesn't quite reach the crow's nest, but that's all good because we've set our pivot point to there. Make sure you're in the correct view, and we can just scale things up. Very nice. Okay, now that we've done all that, let's just apply a mirror modifier to this now, just so that we get both sides. So let's reset the 3D cursor, so Shift S for snap, and snap the cursor to the world origin, and that's just going to reset it. And we'll also reset our pivot point back to median point. We'll now add a cylinder, and this is going to essentially be our bowsprit at the front of the boat. Rotate it into position. Now, so we can extend it out easily, let's change the orientation of our tool to be set to the normal. That means we'll just be able to drag it out into the correct orientation. Now we can just simply scale it down and scale down that inside part too, just so it isn't too thick. And once you're happy with it, we can then just move it back up a little bit. Let's set it to global again. Also, if you don't do this, make sure you set it to global as well. And there's our very simple bowsprit. We can finally move on to the Quarterdeck's fencing. So we can just duplicate one of the fences from our forecastle and put it into position. And then after that, it's literally exactly the same. So just power on through that in the same fashion as we did the forecastle. Now, if you notice that your upper wood is a bit on an angle, you can simply just scale on 0 like we did with the bottom to flatten it out. Now I'm just going to fix up that part at the back here. So let's go into edit mode, go into vertex selection, and pull that vertex back on the Y axis. And as you can see, that's making that look a lot nicer. Now we're going to create the sail. Let's create a plane object. Go into edit mode and rotate it so that it is in the correct orientation. Move it up. At this point here, we could scale it on X and then move it down on Z. But in this case, let's select the top 2 vertices. Use Shift S to set our 3D cursor to that point. We'll change our pivot point to be the 3D cursor. Now simply just scale the sail up. Pretty simple. make sure that you reset the pivot point back to median point after you're done using the 3D cursor pivot point. Once you have it at a correct size, what we're going to do is we're going to subdivide our model many times. This is going to act as the basis for the cloth simulation that we're going to apply to it. Now, select the bottom corners as well as all the vertices in the top row. Once you've done that, you want to create a new vertex group and call it pin or cloth pin. And this is going to act as the pin in our cloth simulation. Make sure that you assign it, though, to your selection. Jump over to our Physics tab, select our cloth, and let's assign our pin under Shape. As you can see, there's a pin group. Your cloth pin should be in there. Nothing's going to happen at the moment when we play our simulation. That's because we need to add a physics object, and we're going to add a wind physics object. Simply rotate that so it's pointing in the correct rotation and increase the strength. Now when we press play, you'll see that the sail fills with wind and gives us a nice realistic sail look. We could play with the settings, but it looks pretty good for now. What we're going to do now is we're going to apply that cloth simulation just so that it keeps its shape. We can delete the wind force field. Now let's join everything together. Select all your mesh type objects. Then we're going to go to the object menu, convert to, and convert to a mesh. That's just going to ensure that if there's any modifiers on any object, they're gone. Now we can use Ctrl-J to join. It's all one mesh now. Let's right-click to get our object context menu, shade smooth. Now there's a bit of problems going on, so to fix that, go to the object data properties, down to normals, and apply auto smooth. And that's just going to fix up the angles. Set the origin into a nice position. Let's first reset our 3D cursor with our Shift-S cursor to world origin. Move our boat up, right-click, set origin and origin to 3D cursor, and that's just going to set our origin point to be a nice point on our boat. Wonderful. And there you go. If you followed along successfully, you have now created a stylized sailing ship. Congratulations. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a like. If you would like to see something new or you want to see a certain type of tutorial, leave it down in the comments below. And again, if you're interested in this new service that I'm developing for Blender, blendertutorials.org, head over to the site and sign up to our newsletter. I can't wait to start sharing things in regards to it with all of you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week with the next part of this tutorial series. This is Hayden Fousen from blendertutorials.org, signing off.